Hello and welcome to H-Karts, and another belated review coming your way. This is our perspective of the final round of the 2019 BUKC season, which took place at the full Whilton Mill International Circuit. Last year at Clay Pigeon, we all stayed in the Cougar, a motorhome which belonged to Joseph Jakes, and the crew were fed a tasty spaghetti bolognese. We would have no such luxury this year with tents and a single tube of concave crisps. At least Dennis found a 5-star bonnet. Our track walk revealed that the first couple of corners were slightly damp, which seemed to please Alex Gunn, but it also caught out Kezia Santoso as she almost skidded into our resident videographer. Another point to note was the newly built clubhouse adjacent to the start-finish straight, complete with an ample viewing balcony, bar and DJ area, and a place for Aaron Walsh to sit down, although it did mean we lost our traditional slot at the table. Ah well, none of us were out for the first race anyway, so we watched some of the action at the boot, in particular, that marshal over there keeping an eye out for any incidents. It was good hard close racing throughout, obviously too good for this marshal. At least it gave us a good idea on where not to overtake. Alex Gunn and Jack Hodges were out for their first race of the day, which was actually the second race of the day. From 30th on the grid, the shotgun had a clean start, unlike that of Leeds B, but it went badly for Hodges as on the run to Christmas Corner, he tried to piggyback de Montfort B but ended up spinning round onto the grass. He went from 20th to last. The second lap saw Gunn continue to make progress, partly at the expense of this spinning Nottingham B, while Hodges was going for his own recovery drive, playing dare with the runoff at Oblivion. Too far in the case of Exeter B. The jackhammer later received a black flag whilst in 22nd and ended up finishing in 30th, a shame because he had a very quick car underneath him as he set the fastest final sector of anyone. Meanwhile, Gunn finished 12th after a hard battle with Coventry A and Warwick A. Was he happy with his race? That'll be a rather firm no then. Next up for race 3 were Sam Turn starting 26th and Kezia Santoso starting 33rd, although our cameraman had other things on his mind. From the off, Turn was already getting stuck in, but unfortunately for him, it was just the warm-up laps. Not to worry, he still had a very good start to move up to 19th after the first lap, while Quick Kez moved up 3 places from her grid slot. Despite picking up a cone penalty, Turn was in good form as for the most part, he worked together with Birmingham A's Rory Smith in order to make progress through the field. This overtake on Manchester A put the turntable 5th, and he even tried his hand at sleep driving. He just about caught up to the battle for second on the final lap, but just too late, and Turn was eventually classified 6th thanks to his cone banter. Meanwhile, Santoso enjoyed some good battles with other drivers on her way to 30th. Race 4 saw Aaron Walsh starting 11th for the A-team and the day's first appearance of a driver making his last appearance in the BUKC, Ollie Milner, up in 4th. Over his career, he has won 3 races, including his very first race at the 2015 qualifiers, and sprouted at least 5 middle fingers. Has he enjoyed his time in the BUKC?
Yeah, it's been good over the years. Can't say too much about this year, but you take it as it is.
That'll be a rather firm, not bad. Both drivers had good starts to the race as the man with 5 middle fingers maintained 4th, while Walsh gained 4, to run 7th. On the second lap, Milner made a move on Edinburgh B for 3rd place and made it stick. Then Walsh became involved in one of the most dramatic moments of the season as championship contenders Loughborough A rode his rear bumper going into increments and spun off. It was judged to be a racing incident, but this more or less spelt the end of Loughborough A's hopes as they were already having a difficult day. Both Huddersfield drivers ran in the top 4 for the early part of the race, but Walsh in particular was going well, and on the 6th lap, Captain Chaos moved in front of Milner to assume 3rd. His move on 2nd, however, wasn't quite as straightforward, as unseen by the livestream or by that Huddersfield camera bloke, Walsh picked up an ABC penalty. Here are 2 drivers testing the grip levels on the grass, and there is Manchester A doing the same. Walsh's ABC was a bit of a shame as with less than a third of the race to go, he moved into the lead with a neat out-braking manoeuvre on UWTSD Swansea A. The best he could hope for was 5th, and indeed he managed just that by leading the field home. Things behind him, however, were about to get explosive. A late penalty for Oxford Brookes A meant a change of tactics in the bid to help out Oxford Brookes B's championship chances, which would ultimately backfire as this scramble at Ashby allowed their main rivals Coventry A to get ahead. From a Huddersfield point of view, the real drama would happen on the final lap as Milner tried to defend his position from Brookes B, but they weren't having any of it. The result was that a stack of tyres got obliterated and that Milner eventually finished 13th. Both drivers had a little chat afterwards, each telling the other how much fun their battle was. As for Walsh, what could have been his first BUKC win ended up being a 5th. What exactly happened with the penalty?
I overtook someone on the left-hander there and... well, side-by-side contact's legal in MSA racing, so...
That'll be a rather firm, I might have been a bit of a naughty boy. Just 2 more races to go for round 7, but only 1 more to go for Huddersfield, with Stephen Letts starting 7th and Jack Linus starting 17th. Once again, it was a good start for Huddersfield as they gained positions during the first laps, while Lead C mistakenly thought their go-kart had a reverse gear. Lap 2, however, was a disaster for the racing Linus as going into Christmas Corner, he locked up, spun round and dropped to 26th. Meanwhile, Letts had moved up to 2nd by the start of lap 3, but a little nudge from Nottingham B briefly dropped him down to 4th before retaking 3rd at Ashby. A couple of laps later, Lichfield's lieutenant moved back up to 2nd ahead of Southampton A. He would remain there until the end of the race, while Jack Linus recovered to finish 19th despite headbutting a couple of cones. They don't call it oblivion for nothing. With all of Huddersfield's racing done, our amateur cameraman retired for some brief filming at the boot, and also to try and gain tips from other photographers. Once the final race of round 7 was done, Huddersfield A ended up taking a round podium thanks to 3 top 6 finishes, while Huddersfield B were down in 37th. Amazingly, this was Huddersfield's first round podium of the season. How hard will Aaron Walsh celebrate?
My mum and dad are watching that. Yes, I'm a good boy and I don't drink alcohol. I'll be on fruit shoots.
Before the end of season party, there was still another round to go, the endurance races. The first one featured both teams, with Stephen Letts starting 6th for the A team and Jack Hodges starting 13th for the B team. Letts had an old sparring partner alongside him. Was he worried about this?
I wasn't aware of this, so I don't really care.
A good start for Lichfield's lieutenant, moving him up to 3rd after the first couple of corners, followed by 2nd place later around the lap. On the 2nd lap, Letts took the lead from Bristol A at the boot and then just disappeared into the distance. He left it later than usual to make his first stop as he wanted to build a gap over the rest of the field, and a quick first stop plus the fact that Stephen Letts is Stephen Letts meant that by half distance, the gap between 1st and 2nd had grown to 15 seconds. Meanwhile, Jack Hodges ran in 16th for much of the mid part of the race, but the B team's finishing position would be affected slightly by a cone penalty, although the role of the cone was actually being played by tyre stacks, so small correction, Hodges had picked up a tyre penalty. At his 2nd stop, he handed over to Keji Santoso, who eventually brought the car home in 20th, while Letts handed over to Alex Gunn. Once Birmingham A made their final stop, handing the lead back to the A team, all the shotgun had to do was bring the car home. And indeed, he did just that, taking Huddersfield's first win of 2019. Sorry, Aaron. How did Gunn find his race?
It was quite easy. Steve again did most of it, but it's quite a nice afternoon for a drive, really. So yeah, feels good to be back on the top. It's a great year we've had so far. We're not in it this year, so it's nice to end out with a win. We've still got 1 more Enduro to go, so we'll see what comes out of that. So yeah.
And how about the mercurial Stephen Letts?
It was, yeah, okay.
Anyway, as the 2nd endurance race didn't feature any Huddersfield drivers, we took time out to set up our tents and watch race 2, before Sam Turn and Jack Linus were out for the final race of the season. Huddersfield A had another chance of taking a round win. Could Turn do it from 31st on the grid?
We'll try, give it our best go. We just need everyone to fall off in front of us and sorted.
The race got underway very quickly, and almost immediately, Turn was backwards after a pile-up triggered by Exeter A and Oxford Brook C. There goes the chance of a round win. Bizarrely, he still managed to gain 3 places from his grid slot, while Linus avoided the first lap chaos to go from 24th to 13th. No spin this time at Christmas Corner either. He moved into 12th place past Nottingham A, while the turntable was making progress at the expense of whoever had spun off right there. Both drivers pitted for fuel only quite early into the first pit window, and by the time it closed, Linus and Turn were running in 14th and 17th, less than 10 seconds apart from each other. In the process, however, the racing Linus had picked up his 3rd cone tyre penalty of the day, obviously a magnetic attraction to the handsome Jack. Meanwhile in the pits, Aaron Walsh had either been spotted by a nearby sniper, or he was just giving his teammate directions to the fuel bowser. He took over the A-team seat, while Ollie Milner hopped in for the B-team in what would be his final stint in the BUKC. A good stop saw the B-team jump Southampton A. Still roughly 10 seconds apart, Milner moved up to 11th place in the closing stages, but a move for 10th went wrong, and not for the first time, the man with many middle fingers clattered into a tyre stack. This time around, he knocked off a radiator pipe and promptly spun off on his own water going into the boot. At least he took most of the field with him. 11th became 17th for the B team, while the A team suffered as well, dropping from 17th to 21st. So those results put Huddersfield A 13th for the final round. Multiply that by exactly 2 and you have where Huddersfield B finished. The final standings saw Coventry A win the championship by a single point from Loughborough A and Oxford Brookes B in one of the closest BUKC seasons in history. Huddersfield A ended up 8th overall, while Huddersfield B were 29th in what was a difficult season for both teams. Between the final mains and intermediates round was a party and awards ceremony at the clubhouse, where Dennis Trott got completely whacked and ended up on the gantry, but it also saw James Brickles become Bandit of the Year for nicking that cone at Three Sisters. He was out for the first intermediates race of the day, and he was focused on having a clean qualifying session with no incidents. Despite this and a couple of other hairy moments, a quick lap right at the end put him 5th on the grid. He had the potential for a good race, but unfortunately his entire race would be compromised by an unusual problem. Because his legs are shorter than a skinhead's haircut, Coneman has to have the pedals as close to him as possible, but his Go-Kart's Nassau panel was fixed on in a way that meant that the brake pedal was forced to go in the middle position. The loud pedal just about managed to fit into the close position, but at the cost of a throttle that was constantly on. The panel problems resulted in this misjudgment going into Ashby on lap 1, followed by this at the very next corner, which dropped him down to 15th. He persisted with his dodgy panel and battled with Leicester B for 15th, which went well. He recovered from this spin to overtake him with a few laps to go, but then he revived his old nickname by running wide on the final lap and dropping behind his old sparring partner. To show his annoyance, the choked cone shunted into Leicester B at the boots, but with no serious consequences aside from finishing a very frustrated 16th. Next up was another driver making his final appearance in the BUKC, Luke Bath. He had qualified 7th but felt he could go quicker. That boded well for his race, much like a really good start to move up to 3rd by the end of the first lap. He spent much of the race battling with Liverpool A for 2nd place, but then it became a three-way battle for the lead, with early leaders Strathclyde getting caught up in traffic. Having briefly moved up to 2nd, Bath moved back down to 3rd after encountering traffic of his own, but the top 3 were tied together with a metaphorical shoelace until the very end of the race. Eventually, the Bath bomb finished in 3rd, his best ever result in the BUKC, and one he and his girlfriend were delighted with. During the rookies race, which featured a spin at the first couple of corners, there was a bit of discussion going on over who would race next. As we were short on numbers, again, Luke Bath was originally going to do race 3, but fitness was a concern for him, and it was eventually decided that James Brickles would get a second go. Courtesy of the Bath bomb, Brickles started this one in 9th, and once again his first lap was wretched, as he lost 5 positions, followed by 4 more on the next lap. It took Coneman quite a few laps to overtake King's College A, but he eventually did it going into Christmas Corner on lap 11. But then a few laps later at Ashby, King's College A was handed a present after a moment with a backmarker cost Brickles some momentum. That moment seemed to annoy Coneman somewhat, as afterwards he just stopped caring. Luckily for him, the marshals were looking away at that point, and also at this point when he t***ed the tyres. There was still the matter of King's College A to solve, and Brickles got in front coming out of oblivion, this time for good. During his charge, he broke below the 55-second barrier a couple of times. He also witnessed this collision between 2 drivers going into Parker's, and then decided to do it properly on the next lap. That was for 13th on Uni of Life B, whereas these 2 weren't overly relevant in terms of position. This one, however, was, as Brickles and UCLA muscled past a backmarker going into the boot, before Brickles moved into 12th coming out of the boot. On the final lap, he came across a bit of a melee, 2 of which were for position. He got one of them going into Parker's, and had to settle for that as the finish line came just a little bit too soon. 11th on the road became 10th post-race, his 5th top 10 finish in his 15th and final BUKC race as an undergraduate for Huddersfield. He tried to tell Alex Gunn this, but the shotgun couldn't care less. Race 4 saw the last appearance of the day for Huddersfield C and Cleo Chinardi's final BUKC race before graduating. This race also saw someone go AWOL during warm-up. Quick Cleo had qualified 20th, but as she did in many of her other races, she made a good start to move up to 17th and continued to make good progress up the order as she battled with Northumbria A, Imperial B and somebody from Alpha Live for much of the race. With just 3 laps to go, she had moved up to 11th, but then disaster as an incident somewhere in the first sector cost her 13 seconds and 8 positions. None of the Huddersfield crew had seen what happened, but Cleo explained afterwards that she'd had a spin. Oh well, her actual pace was very strong during the race and that's more important. So even though one driver took part in 2 races, well technically 2 drivers took part in 1.5 races, sort of. Anyway, all races were eligible for points, and it had been a decent day for Huddersfield C with 10th place overall, again another improvement from the previous round. In terms of the final standings, the C team moved up from 14th to 11th, winning a 3-way tiebreaker with Aston B and King's College A. Winning the Intermediates Championship were Bath B, who were consistently strong throughout the whole season. One more day of racing remained, and unlike last season where Huddersfield featured in all 3 classes, only the lightweights class was where a Huddersfield driver could be found, and there were 4 of them: Jack Linus, Sam Turn, Aaron Walsh and Bandit of the Year. The first heat featured the former half of that driver roster, with 15th on the grid for the turntable and 23rd for the racing Linus, but it didn't go well for either driver during a frenetic first lap as Linus was delayed at the first corner and likewise for Turn at Ashby. The two ran together for more or less the entirety of the 10-minute race as they recovered from outside the top 20 to eventually finish 14th and 15th, with Linus winning the inter-team battle by the tiniest of margins. Turn then got involved in another incident as he collided with his own go-kart on the grid. The second heat contained the other half of the Huddersfield roster, and they were starting quite high up on the grid with Brickles in 8th and Walsh in 4th. Having come first on the road during his sprint race, what was Aaron hoping for?
I'm hoping for a good result. I mean, if I can't go forward from here, I'll be upset.
On the contrary, Brickles had a rather different approach. As the Drivers' Championship encouraged fancy dress, he decided to milk his nickname as much as possible by dressing up as a cone. There was a giant Easter egg up for grabs. Did he fancy his chances?
Well, I know I'm not going to win any prizes in racing, so I might as well go for the other option.
This novel approach even had Exeter's Alistair Mallard worried.
Oh, oh.
The start was just as chaotic as the previous heat as a melee at Christmas Corner caused a couple of drivers, and a cone, to take a shortcut. Upon rejoining, somebody biffed Coneman but didn't receive a cone penalty for it. While Brickles was down in 20th, Walsh maintained 4th at the end of the first lap, but he was looking for more than that as he moved into 2nd. A move for the lead, however, went a bit wrong as Captain Chaos shunted James Grant off the circuit, received a black flag and finished down in 20th. As for the cone, although he wasn't especially quick during this race, he did manage to stay out of further trouble and finish 16th, despite being overtaken by Sean the Sheep. Both drivers were out again for Heat 3, and they were joined by Jack Linus as well. Could he get a good result from 9th on the grid?
Maybe, yeah, first race went pretty well, so we'll see what we can do.
As for the other two, they were starting down in 24th and 28th thanks to the reverse grid system. How did Walsh see his early black flag?
It looked like the move was on. It kind of wasn't in the last one, so...
Did the turntable think the move was on?
Oh, definitely not. He's being a bandit, really.
With that settled, let's get on with the racing, which saw a much cleaner first few corners than the previous 2 heats. Not to worry, the Ashby hairpin will see to that. It hadn't been a good first lap for Linus as he dropped to 17th, and then it got even worse as he was spun round at Ashby hairpin. That same hairpin saw this interesting moment for Brickles. But it was this moment at the boot which gave the cone an ABC penalty. It was similar to the one that Ollie Milner received in Llandau, a comparison which Brickles was rather keen to point out. Then during the final lap, he forgot that it was an individual drivers' championship and teamed up with the recovering Linus with moderate success. Linus finished 25th, while Brickles finished 30th thanks to his penalty. After a quick fist bump, the racing Linus showed exactly how he felt about his race. As for Walsh, he kept it out of trouble this time as he finished 15th. Poor old Sam Term was on his lonesome for the final heat, although with 31 strangers to share his highly pleasant company. Although the turntable lost a position on the first lap, he had a decent car underneath him and steadily worked his way up the order. He finished 11th on the road, but a smattering of penalties for other drivers brought him up to 9th post-race and comfortably into the A final. Who would be joining him? Well, it certainly wouldn't be James Brickles, who was starting 18th in the B final, although he wasn't too bothered by this as he had won the giant Easter egg for his fancy dress outfit. He was joined by Jack Linus, who was starting up in 6th. He maintained that position during the first lap, while Brickles had a good start for once as he picked his way through the traffic coming out of Christmas. He nearly got by gentleman driver Adam Sears at the boot, but held station. He was up to 15th, which wasn't normal, so he dropped back to 22nd on the next lap. For the rest of the race, Brickles battled hard with Hirsch Reddy. Very hard. Extremely hard. Just a little too hard in that instance, but no harm done. After many laps of trying, Brickles finally got ahead of Reddy on the penultimate lap going into Parker's and was up to 18th, but his hard work was undone on the final lap as, having lost a place to Dylan Paddison, a mistake under braking at Ashby dropped Coneman a load of places. A kick of oversteer at the boots then caused his race-long buddy to nudge him out of the way. Reddy subsequently received an ABC penalty for that, promoting Brickles up to 21st, but both had enjoyed a good hard battle. By comparison, Linus's race was actually rather quiet as, aside from one lap, he spent the entire race in 6th place and for the most part stuck behind George Bridson. As it was the top 4 who went through to the A final, this effectively ended one hell of a BUKC career for the racing Linus with 3 wins in 5 years. So on to the A final, where Sam Term was starting 22nd and Aaron Walsh in 30th, but unexpected rain had made its way into the equation and the warm-up laps proved to be tricky. Amazingly enough, all drivers managed to slither their way through the first couple of corners, but then came Nightmare at Christmas Corner as a spinning Rayan Williams created chaos. This affected Turns somewhat, who found himself 23rd, 1 place behind Aaron Walsh. It wasn't until 1/4 distance when both drivers started to make progress on a circuit that was getting drier. From 22nd and 23rd on lap 3, Turn and Walsh found themselves in 13th and 14th just 6 laps later. And with the pace they had, they both had a chance of making it into the top 10, which would grant them a place in the super final. It eventually culminated into a battle for 8th, but despite an incident between Tom Thickpenny and Lewis Bracewell, Turn and Walsh just missed out with 11th and 13th. With no Huddersfield drivers in the super final, we all just went home. And that concludes Huddersfield's coverage of the 2019 BUKC season, a season which proved to be a bit difficult in places with a few crashes, a few penalties, but also with a few wins. We will be back next season, and with the A team at least likely to remain unchanged, we will gun for the 2020 championship. Stay tuned and see you soon.